Hey up everyone, welcome back to the Rugby League History channel. Tonight my video is going to be the third episode of the Rugby League Coffee Club. This is a video series I do where I answer your questions. These can be followers of mine on either YouTube, Instagram, MySpace, um, um, Twitter, even though I don't have a Twitter account. I answer your questions that you have. I do a post on Instagram and you ask your rugby league questions and I try to answer them the best I can and as honest as I can. I've done 2 previous episodes. Go check those out. But without further ado, let's get into the first question, and it comes from Hayden Otti 18. So it's Hayden underscore Otti 18. This was on Instagram, and he asks, who's Canberra's best current player in your opinion? I'd have to say current, and that doesn't include injured players, so players that are currently playing. I'd have to say probably either George Williams, he's been playing really well, and also Josh Papali. Maybe most consistent player, Jared Croker. I think you always know what you're going to get with Jared Croker week in, week out. To be fair, I don't really watch a lot of Canberra games, so I'm not watching them week in, week out, 80 minutes, that type of keeper. But from what I've seen, definitely Josh Papali would be up there and George Williams, along with Jared Croker. The second question comes from CJ Moxley, 1908. And he asks, grand final prediction, question mark. And this question was asked on Instagram. Well, I think to make the grand final you have to finish in the top 4. And at this stage the top 4 is pretty much set in stone, except for the 4th place team. But from what I've seen, I think it's going to be a Penrith-Melbourne grand final at this stage. But don't hold me to that. The next question comes from Nick from Australia. This is via Instagram, and he asks, who do you believe should take over as head coach of North Queensland? I think out of all the names that have been tossed up, you've had Kevin Walters, Todd Payton, Josh Hannay, who's the interim coach, he's thrown his hand up. And also Anthony Griffin apparently has applied for the position. Out of all those, I think I'd go for Anthony Griffin. Number 1, he's a Queenslander, and I think that he'd feel right at home in Townsville. Number 2, I think he's probably itching to get back into coaching. He left Penrith in a bad place for him personally. I think he was really hard done by Penrith. He had him in a really good spot, and then they got shot of him. And I think he's got the experience, because whoever gets that North Queensland position is going to be walking into an absolute mess. So I think they're going to need someone experienced. Josh Hannay, he's done out since he's been in the interim coaching position. Todd Payton, I think he's maybe a bit too inexperienced to be head coach of North Queensland at this stage, because well, he's going from one fucking mess to another when you really think about it. He's going from New Zealand to North Queensland. Kevin Walters might be alright, but for me it'd be Anthony Griffin. The next question comes from Sibby Powell, and this one's also from Instagram. They ask, is there an active bias against non-New South Wales clubs by the NRL? Well, if you look at some of the non-New South Wales clubs individually, so if you look at Brisbane, they're known to have a very favourable draw every year, and they also get some other favourable things that some people claim. Melbourne always seem to get the rub of the green with the NRL referees and officials, and sometimes with the judiciary as well. They seem to get off with stuff like that. Canberra's been a bit hard done by in the past with some referee calls, especially the 2019 grand final. Some people think that was a major mess up. Newcastle, well, even though they're not a a Sydney team. I guess you could probably put them into the same thing. I wouldn't see that there was an active bias against the non-New South Wales clubs. I think deep down the NRL, they want the non-New South Wales clubs to be successful, and they want them all to do well, because could you imagine if it was just Sydney clubs winning it every year, or two Sydney clubs in the grand final every year? Obviously the rest of the country, or the fan bases outside of Sydney, are going to lose interest or get disheartened. So I think, especially when Melbourne, Canberra, North Queensland and teams like that are making the finals and making the grand final, they're rubbing their hands together because they want the game to grow. I think this kind of thought about there being a biased view against for the Sydney clubs over the non-Sydney clubs goes back all the way back to the early 90s, when John Rebo, who was the CEO of Brisbane, said that there was an active bias against Brisbane when it was predominantly still the New South Wales Rugby League competition. But I personally don't think there's an active bias against the non-New South Wales clubs. The next question comes from Lucas Briz Oz, and this was a question from Instagram, and he asked, would Belmean have won the 1988 grand final if Hanley wasn't illegally taken out? It's hard to see whether they would have won it, but it definitely changed the game in Canterbury's favour. If you don't know, Ellery Hanley joined Belmean on a guest stint from, I think, Leeds or St Helens he come from, and he played about 6 or 7 matches, and I think 5 or 6 of those were pretty much man of the match performances, and he got Belmean into the grand final against Canterbury, and Belmean were up 6 points to 4. They just got a try, and in the 30th minute, Terry Lamb took Ellery Hanley out with a really late tackle, knocked him out, and Ellery Hanley, I think he come back to the field after having a bit of a check, but he wasn't the same. He didn't come back for the second half, and Canterbury run over the top of Belmean. I think if he would have stayed on the field, it would have been a much closer game, because the final score was 24 points to 12. It's hard to see whether they would have won it, but I think certainly when Hanley went off the field, that was pretty much game over for Belmean. He was kind of like their X Factor player, and that was pretty much it. Nick from Australia, he asks another question. He's double dipping. What are your thoughts on the career of Jason Tamalolo so far? Well, he's pretty much achieved everything in the game so far. He's won a premiership. He's won a Dally M. I think the only thing he probably hasn't achieved is win the Rugby League World Cup with either New Zealand or Tonga, whoever he feels like playing for when the World Cup shows up. He'll also probably go down as one of North Queensland's greatest ever players. I'm pretty sure in the future, when they do the 50th year anniversary for the North Queensland side, or the 100 year anniversary, Jason Tamalolo will be in that team. I personally don't watch a lot of North Queensland matches. I don't. Same with Canberra. I kind of just watch the highlights. So I don't get to watch Jason Tamalolo play that much, but I think he's pretty much achieved everything that he can as a player so far, except for win the World Cup, I guess. The next question comes from the biggest tiger, and he asks, how good was Steve Roach? Well, he was one of the premier front rows of the 1980s. He played for Australia, played for New South Wales, and he was in the he's in my Belmean team of the century, and he made the team of the century for Belmean itself in their official. And I think also he made the West Tigers greatest ever team as well, even though he didn't play for West Tigers. So how good was he? Pretty good. And another question comes from Andrew_priv.05. He asks, can Penrith go all the way? I think Penrith can go all the way, but I think from now until the end of the year, I think that they need to lose maybe 1 or 2 matches just to base that bubble and to bring them back down to 8th, because I've noticed over the last couple of years, clubs that win the Premiership, they don't go the whole way through undefeated, or they don't go the whole way through on a big winning streak. Eventually it comes to an end and then they have to kind of reconfigure. So I think with Penrith, they can go all the way, but I think they just need to lose maybe 1 or 2 matches before the finals, just to bring them back down to 8th and show that they're not invincible, and that when it comes to the finals that they'll be ready. The next question comes from All Things Rugby League, and they ask, best New South Wales / Queensland Cup ground. I don't really watch the Queensland Cup. I know all the teams in the Queensland Cup, but I just don't watch it. But from the brief glimpses that I've seen, I think Sunshine Coast Stadium looks alright. And the best New South Wales Cup ground, well, it's a dead heat between North Sydney Oval and Henson Park. I can't go past both of those. If you're in Sydney, definitely go to one of those grounds. Hope you like me oversized novelty Sports Direct mug, by the way. Oh, and that's it. That's all the questions for this episode of the Rugby League Coffee Club, episode 3. I hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope if you asked the question that you got the answer that you wanted. If you are enjoying the channel and the content that I'm making, click that subscribe button. Click that notification bell so you get an email when I do a new video. I'll be doing another video really soon, so stay tuned for that one. But as always, everyone, catch us all later. Look after yourselves. Tatty bye.